Welcome to the Adventures in CRE audio series. Join Michael Belasco and Spencer Burton as they pull back the curtain on everything commercial real estate and introduce you to some of the top minds in the industry. If you want to take your skills to the next level and be part of a growing community of CRE professionals across the world, this is for you.
Hello and welcome back to the Adventures in CRE audio series. Today we've got a really cool podcast episode for you. We're talking about the 3 keys to LinkedIn success in CRE. And as always, we've got the team here. We've got Michael Belasco, Spencer Burton, and a new member of the team, Tucker Wells. Welcome everybody to today's episode.
Thanks, Sam.
So like I was talking about, we're excited. It's a really great episode all about how to portray yourself in the best light on LinkedIn. But before we get into that, we've got a new face here, a new member of the team. And I want to turn the time over to you, Tucker, and to introduce yourself to the audience, tell them about your background and kind of what your ambitions are here as you start working with Adventures in CRE.
Well, thank you, Sam, Michael, and Spencer. And thank you to the listeners. My name's Tucker Wells, and, I feel like I used to be in the shoes of some of your listeners, guys. I was lost. I lost hope. I was switching industries from commercial real estate to recruiting and just really found my niche. I found my passion. And more than that, I found Adventures in CRE. So for you guys who are out there who are maybe struggling and maybe trying to, take that next step in your career, that next job is out there. And with these key principles that we're going to discuss today, I think you'll have a higher probability of getting there.
Awesome.
Yeah. Awesome. And let me add a little bit to that, because I think it's important to understand the context of how Tucker came to contribute to Adventures in CRE. So a few years ago, I got a random email from Tucker Wells, and I don't exactly remember what it was about. I think you were asking, about like, I don't remember what it was, but over time we developed kind of a friendship, and he became just a great advocate for A.CRE readers. And he was a recruiter. It still is a real estate recruiter. And so he quickly, kind of plugged in an ad hoc basis. Anytime that there was someone as part of the audience, especially who are younger in their career and they needed someone in kind of the recruiting space just to bounce ideas off of, I always knew I could refer him to Tucker. And he's the type that is just always willing and happy to give back and contribute, irrespective of whether there's something for him in return. And so earlier this year, we'd been thinking, like, how do we expand the career services component of Adventures in CRE? And Tucker was just a natural fit to come and contribute to that effort. So he's now a formal, as formal as you can get at A.CRE. He's now a formal part of the team, and he contributes to both the career side of the world. So we have a career accelerator, many of you know about, where our team can provide some resume review and one-on-one coaching, and Tucker handles those tasks, and then he also helps kind of big organizations, universities get the training they need through our accelerator. So we're really excited and happy to have Tucker on and welcome him to the audience.
Thanks, Spencer.
Yeah, we're excited. We're excited for you, Tucker. And so let's jump into the topic today. And I'm going to ask Michael for his opinion, because when it comes to your career in CRE and social media, and in this case, we're talking about LinkedIn, how important is your LinkedIn profile and just your digital profile in today's job market?
Well, yeah, thanks for the question, Sam. I'm going to refer back to my early years of getting to know Spencer Burton, where when we were first starting the website, one of the biggest takeaways I had from him, and what he actually had taught me early on, was all about controlling your narrative, especially online, and how important that is. And today in commercial real estate, whether you're you're out there networking or trying to leverage yourself and get into a job or get promoted into a better position, LinkedIn is the number one spot in today's world where people will go and will either check you out or want to learn more about you. So, in my opinion, and I'd probably all of you guys would agree, LinkedIn is the number one platform where people are going to look at you. And so it's critically important that you spend time and you curate that profile of yourself so that when people come to look at you and they come to check you out, you will be perceived in the way that you are hoping to be perceived. So, it's all about controlling that narrative. And that's something that, Spencer had discussed early on and kept repeating to me. And I've taken that to heart. And so you'll see even beyond LinkedIn, you'll notice Spencer and I have even personal websites. Spencer's much more active on his, but just to be able to control that narrative, LinkedIn is by far and away one of, if not the most important spot to be doing that, to be controlling your narrative, especially in the professional world.
Yeah. And what that means in context, in like practice, is if I Google Michael Belasco, what comes up? And so if I'm thinking, if I'm young in my career, or even if I'm old in my career, I want to go Google myself. What comes up? And for most people, it's your LinkedIn page. And so Tucker's going to give those 3 points today, keys specific to real estate, for how to make your LinkedIn profile communicate something positive to the industry, to people that interact with you.
Yeah.
Well,
with that,
thank you.
Let's jump into it. Let's go ahead and the 3 keys. Obviously, I know there's more nuance to LinkedIn. Of course, there's some details and things like that. But let's start with these 3 keys, these big macro components. Let's start with key number 1.
Well, thank you. And if you'd like to go deeper, Spencer mentioned the Career Accelerator, but point number 1 is your photo. In my times in executive search, when I got a resume, I looked at their LinkedIn. It was the very first thing. And so it needs to show who you are. If you have energy, if you're enthusiastic, if you're serious, how can you portray that picture? And Spencer mentioned it's kind of like an enhanced and extended business card. And if you are able to portray, or like Michael said, control the narrative, you're just able to have that unique selling point about you, right away through the photo.
It's an interesting idea that something as simple as the picture you choose this is all about attention, right? Whether or not you get attention and how people perceive you. So, there's the do's side, like you could hire a photographer and do something good. What about the don't side? What are some absolute things that you don't want to do? Some faux pas, as you might say. What are some things that you've seen people do that are maybe not the best?
That's a good question, Sam. Maybe like a tuxedo. They're at their prom or at a wedding. That's a don't. If you're in the construction business, I think you can maybe have a more, just like construction oriented photo, maybe with a hard hat. But going back to the do's, if you're in commercial real estate development acquisitions, you need to be dressed up like your clients would want to see you. You never get another chance to make a first impression, and this is it.
Right. So this is position. Yeah, this is not your Instagram profile. This is not your Facebook profile. This is a professional profile.
Right on. Yes.
Yeah. Let me speak to that. Oh, I'm sorry, Mike. Go ahead.
No, well, I was going to say to the point of do's and don'ts. So do's is, to me, I guess what I'm hearing is dress for the position you want, right? If you're in construction and you're going for a project manager or something like that, that's fine. For don'ts, someone who's been in the hiring position, many times, I could give a little bit of insight. For me, like the more time you put on your picture, the better off. If you went and got a professional photo done, that's well worth the money. Some of the worst photos I see is the ones that are kind of cropped, like, this person's at some sort of party or a function and it's fuzzy and they're like cropped, and you see somebody's arm hanging off the shoulder and the other side.
Yeah.
It really reflects you and how you're trying to portray yourself. So you want to put everything you can into that photo. So everything about the don'ts, really, it's focusing on the do's, which is do everything you can to make that good first impression. So I'll kick it over to you, Spencer. I knew we were.
No, you're spot on. You're spot on. It's like less is more with your LinkedIn photo. Put thought into it, look professional. But what I mean by less is more: plain background, a conservative dress, a nice smile. Hopefully you've taken a shower.
Smell doesn't come to the photo yet.
Of what's that? My wife's favorite show with Elle Woods, and she has her resume is pink and it smells like perfume. That's just a risk not worth taking. It's kind of the same with your photo. Like, you can try to push the envelope, but at least when it comes to real estate, it's not worth the risk, right? It's not there. And so that's my view on it. Go ahead.
I would just add to that, portray who you are as well, right? If you can. It's hard in a picture, for me, like, even personally, I've always been a little bit more laid back. You'll rarely ever see me without a beard. So things like that, like, show your personality, but be professional at the same time. There's a good balance there. How to convey. And maybe Tucker, you might have something to add to that, but that's just.
I do. I
go
do. And Spencer is Legally Blonde, I think.
Legally Blonde, yeah.
But, Spencer mentioned that clear background. I think my background is of the Dallas skyline. And, you can see I have New York back here. And so I want to portray, even on Zoom, real estate and books. I love education. And so I think if you're able to use that to enhance who you are, using the background, if you can do it right, then that'll even add value to the picture.
Yeah, it's interesting to say. This may be slightly off topic, but it's a little bit relevant to you saying books, because we've had this talk recently with senior people. It's very topical today. What do you put as your background on Zoom? Right now, I'm in a bit of a transition, so you're getting what you get. But it's funny that younger people, I've realized, want to look more scholarly and present themselves as older. So it's books or like classic photos, where I'm noticing more senior established people are looking to do the inverse. It's really interesting. They're looking to put like quirky photos, or they're against actually putting books in the background, which I find pretty interesting. You'll look at the early podcasts. I have books in my background. I may have them again once I get resettled here. But it's just interesting topic, like background on photos or background on a Zoom call. It's all interesting, and weighing how important that all is, right? Like right now I'm settling, I would say, for what I have, just because we are in transition. But Sam, Tucker, Spencer, you guys have like a very beautiful, well-placed background, and it's not by accident. So
communicate something about your personality. And so and we'll move on to point 2 here in a moment, Tucker, so bear with us. But like LinkedIn, it is your first impression, right? And I don't think we can reinforce this enough. It is your expanded business card. When people want to know something about you, and I brought this up before, but when someone emails me and I've never met them before I respond, I generally go to their LinkedIn page.
Mm-hmm.
You're kind of curious, like, who is this? What have they done? And the picture, the very first thing you see, and so it communicates something. When an employer is interested in you as a candidate, as Tucker brought up, they go to your LinkedIn page. When someone, maybe it's a potential client, goes, who is this? Who would I be working with? Or a future co-worker or a student, whatever it may be. People just look you up on LinkedIn, and so that's a pretty important thing, your first impression. So
even when our readers who we talk to, I talk to at least 1 or 2 a week. Almost every time before I have the conversation, I'll go check out the LinkedIn, right? I want to know who I'm talking to. I want to get a little bit of background. So yeah, it plays a very important role.
All right. So let's move on to, I mean, I know it's so simple, but the beauty is in the simplicity, right? So point number 2, what is key number 2, Tucker?
Well, really, it's highlight past results in your summary for the job. And like Michael and Spencer both spoke about, yes, the picture is great. And if it passes the eye test, then that's amazing. The second point they're going to look at is, all right, what companies have you worked for, and what have you done at those companies? So are you a results kind of person? And so kind of, Sam, going back to the don'ts and the do's. The don't is say, I'm a dedicated, determined, ambitious individual. Say, I closed 3 transactions worth, $4 million in 2019. That's a better thing to say versus the, I'm a determined individual.
Right.
So Tucker, sorry, Sam, I might be putting you on the spot a little bit here, and this is going to be a question that I think a lot of our listeners are naturally thinking. What if I don't have the experience or the accolades to put on my LinkedIn profile? Is there anything, and maybe this is a challenging question, I would imagine, is there anything they could do to help bolster their presence if they're just starting out and they want to break in, and yet they don't have that resume or those accomplishments quite yet?
Or even if they're transitioning, they could be mid-career and they're changing into real estate and they don't have real estate accomplishments. That's a really good question.
That's a really good question. You're definitely putting me on the spot there. I think it's important to showcase that, regardless if you have, if you've done anything in your life. For the students who don't have any experience, you can talk about education. What have you done? Are you a part of the real estate club? Are you, a president or a co-president in the real estate club? Are you in a fraternity? Are you, on a chair? Are you an athlete? What's your GPA? That's even one. All the students have that. And so when you talk about the people who don't have that experience, it's going to take a lot more energy, and it's going to take a lot more energy to make the sell on why we should hire you. My best advice I can give you is really try and make it so that you do have that experience. Go get those internships if you're a freshman or a sophomore listening to this. Go try and start a business if you don't have anything on it. Just really try and be active, and I think that's how you're going to separate yourself from the others.
I'm glad you said that, because we had an podcast episode a few months back where we talked about making the most of your situation and going out and finding ways to make it happen, right? And so one piece of advice I give to individuals who are in this very situation is, you don't need a job to underwrite real estate. You don't even need an internship. LoopNet, CRE, you can go on, you can download an OM, and you could model a deal. You may not actually be buying that deal, but you can model the deal. And then you can do that 10 of them in a month, then put that on your resume that you underwrote 10 multifamily properties worth $50 million. And you have to be honest about it. It was a side project. You were practicing your craft. That's something interesting. That's tangible. That's real. And if you're interviewing with a multifamily operator, they're going to find value in that. And so, I mean, that's my response when I hear that question. Yeah. It's like, there are things you can do rather than sitting on your hands and complaining.
Yeah. I wonder if you do, let's say you go do that, right? Let's say you go to CRE or LoopNet or any one of these sites, you underwrite them and you build a model, right? And then maybe you put that on your LinkedIn and you say, ask me for the model, right? Like, do you want to see my model?
Yes.
Then it really shows, okay, here's something that you've done. And we're just thinking off the cuff here. I think we're kind of trying to give our listeners some advice on what you can do. But Tucker, I think that answer was great, right? One of the great things about the real estate industry is that there's a lot of people that, everybody's transitioning in from all over the place into the real estate industry. So, real estate, I always tell people it's like a steep learning curve, but then once you get there, you're there in a lot of ways with all like the understandings of of the nuts and bolts, right? To be like to develop strategies and all that's another story, but to get a fundamental understanding of what you need to know to be able to be effective in a job, it is a steep climb, but you can get there. And so if you can convey that you are active and that you have accomplishments, whatever they may be, they actually are they're interesting. A lot of shops might not be. I mean, even when I was at a larger institution before, we weren't necessarily looking for people with past real estate experience. We were looking for people with really interesting backgrounds that we thought could get the work done.
Yeah.
And we hired a few that had no real estate, and this was a very prominent real estate company.
What's interesting about this conversation, in fact, Spencer, I don't remember the exact episode it was. We've done quite a few now, but I mean, your creativity is really where you need to go. The problem that people get into is they'll try and do the same thing that everybody else has done.
Yeah.
And then that doesn't work. And so we've had people say, well, what if I could come work for you for free? And eventually that turned into something. Or yeah, what if I started a YouTube channel and I started talking about the nuances of the types of positions I want? And I showed, I was actually demonstrating what I'm capable of doing, right? And I got that attention. This thing is all about like really getting attention and keeping it. And so what is the story, and why is your story different than everybody else trying? Because again, so many people attempt to do something, but they find themselves limited to what they've seen other people do, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that is the real limit. That's the real barrier to you sticking out. So what are the things that you can do if you don't have the experience to emulate it, to simulate that experience? And I think even that initiative will show people that are looking to hire, hey, this is a resourceful person. And I think there's a ton of value in that.
Yeah. And back to the key number 2, which is demonstrate action, demonstrate what you like, quantify what you've done, right? I say this a lot when I'm on calls. Most of your value in real estate is your deal seasoning. It's your deal list. It's what you've done, what you've looked at, what markets what property types right? And you quantify that in some way on your LinkedIn profile and on your resume as well. And when you don't have that experience, you find ways to quantify something that demonstrates that you have some seasoning, that you have some understanding. I see Michael smiling there. What am I missing?
Looking like a true acquisitions guy. These development guys working on projects for 5 years are like, my one project.
No, but so we've got 1 and 2.
Yeah.
What is key number 3, Tucker?
Key number 3 is going to be grow your network in areas that you do business in. And so just like if you want to build a muscle, you got to work it every day. You got to eat the right food. For LinkedIn, if you want to get a job in acquisitions or development, you got to start adding those people on LinkedIn. You got to start reaching out to them, becoming familiar with the lingo, entitlements and change orders. That's a few. And so you got to talk the talk, walk the walk, and grow your network.
Let me ask you a question. And I think instinctively, most people don't want to do this, but it's almost like their default task. It's almost like the thing that they just do without even thinking. So you add people to your network, you reach out and you open up a dialogue, or you're trying to open up a dialogue. They usually seem so forced. They seem so one-sided, like, hey, I'm this person, here's what I can do for you, or something along those lines, or they just don't seem very authentic. Do you have any guidelines or a framework or something that makes it so when you're reaching out to these new people, it's not contrived, it's authentic? Anything that you have told people to do?
Well, the framework is really in the Career Accelerator. And so I'd recommend that for a more in-depth analysis. But just like how I became a part of Adventures in CRE, it was a year-long process. And it started with a cold call and a cold email to Spencer saying, hey, I'm a recruiter. I've got a great candidate who's not interested in the job that I'm pitching to him. I'd love to see if he has any interest in joining, the Adventures in CRE Accelerator because he needs Excel skills. Can I introduce him to you? And that's it. And so if you're able to find, a point that allows, a developer or an acquisitions guy to say, hey, this guy just wants to add value. Maybe he even has a site that is off market. And so that's going to be my biggest, that's going to be the biggest takeaway. The biggest framework that I have is find a way to add value, find the guy's problem or the girl's problem, and see if you can solve it. And that is also going to be the most organic and authentic way to get a job with them. And it takes time.
So I want to ask Spencer this question because I know we've had conversations about just the way people reach out to, everyone on the team, really. What advice would you give to, because you get people reaching out to you all the time, and we all know the types of, engagements that are really off-putting. What would you say is best practices in your opinion, or some advice?
Yeah. Well, first off, I love Tucker's advice around adding value, and you can't always add value, but if your intention is to add value, if possible, that comes across, and it's something as easy as, hey, I don't have a lot to add, but if there's anything I could do to help you, let me know. Right. And it's genuine. And even if you don't have anything, and many times, especially when you're young in your career, it's like you'd love to add value, but you may or may not, right? And so that sentiment is important. But coming back to your question, Sam, yeah. So several times a day, people reach out to both Michael and I about everything from simple questions related to careers to more in depth, kind of lengthy questions, and we're always happy and interested in engaging. There's two things that make a response more probable, and we do pretty good at responding, even considering our busy schedule. But two things. Number one is praise, and I know this sounds dumb, but when you reach out to someone, recognize something about them that'll catch their interest, that'll soften what eventually will be almost like a sales pitch, right? You're asking for a meeting. And so it can be something as simple as, hey, I love what you're doing here, or I see that you did this. And it's some way where you demonstrate or you recognize something that they're doing. And it's hard to give a perfect example, but one would be you reach out to Michael and say, hey, Michael, you posted this condo development model, and I downloaded it and I used it to underwrite this property. It was super incredible. It's super helpful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And then you go on to, I'm making a transition from acquisitions into development. And I know that you spent time at a big international developer. Could I pick your brain for 15 minutes about your experience there? Right. And you kind of soften it with that, recognizing something that Michael's done. The second piece is timing. So over the weekend, we just went through Labor Day. I got 2 such emails, very friendly, very nice. I'm right in the middle of hanging out with my kids, and it pops up on my email. And I remember just kind of briefly reading it, going, "Oh, that looks really nice. I need to, reach back out." And then I haven't done it yet. Now I may tomorrow, but there's a good chance I might just forget, because 10 other emails will come in between then and now. And this happens with all of us. And so there's nothing wrong with being a little persistent, not too persistent, but a little persistent. So if you don't get a response from someone after a week, a gentle follow-up saying, "I'm not sure if you got my message from a week. I know you're really busy, but I was wondering if you would have a few minutes." So the example of Michael, and I first started by praising this amazing, he has the best condo development model you're going to find online. Praising his condo development model, and then asking for 15 minutes of his time just to hear about his experience. But he was at the time just having a baby, and he totally missed the message. You follow up a week later and say, "Michael, I know you're incredibly busy. I'm not sure if you saw my message. Would you have 15 minutes to spare just to kind of talk about development?" And if you never hear from someone again, then move on. That's why I say don't be too persistent. But a little bit of persistence will help you, because more than likely the person you reached out to who didn't respond, they didn't not respond because they didn't want to. They more likely didn't respond because they were busy, they were doing a deal, whatever, and it just kind of fell through the cracks.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Michael, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think both Tucker and Spencer gave really great responses. People, and just one minor thing to add to that, people enjoy talking to people that are looking for help. Most people like being in a position where they can offer advice. A company I used to work for had a position they're hiring for, and it was actually my old position. And so I'd get a couple emails, and people didn't know that it was my old position, but they were asking because this job opening happened. Hey, I'm a student, blah, blah, blah. And, I was excited to answer those calls because, I knew the job and I could give them insight. And, it's so if you don't have something to offer, sometimes people just want to be able to help. But Spencer hit it on the head, like a little bit of a comment, even if it's somebody who's just in a position that you aspire to be in, be like, hey, I really admire the company. And, it's really, impressive to see that you've, ascended the ranks and you are where you are. I'd really appreciate some time to just get on the phone, and even if it's for 10 minutes, just to chat with you and learn a little bit more about, your process, how you did it, any advice you might be able to give me, your experience in the company. And most people, I remember being in school and constantly getting replies from that type of email, because people really enjoy giving advice and helping if they can. I personally do. So.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think people are a lot more willing to help than we give them credit for. So,
Sam, can I add one more point?
Yeah, go ahead.
This is a very practical piece of advice. Google Alerts. So if you go to googlealerts.com, you can type in, Leon Capital Group, for example, or Phil Puckett, both companies / people in Dallas. And if Phil Puckett ever does a deal, I automatically get a notification, an email sent to me that Phil Puckett has done a deal. And so I drop him a quick note saying, hey, congrats on, that 60,000 square foot lease in McKinney and Olive building in Uptown Dallas. And that's just like, whoa, like, how did he know that? That gives me an opportunity to make a touch point, build a relationship. And I think that's one great piece of practical advice that any student or any person could use going forward.
That's an awesome little hack. I like it. That's great.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that. I like that. I'm going to start using it too.
Me
That's
too.
great.
Google Alerts.
There you go. And just kind of by way of summary, I mean, I spent a lot of time in the marketing and psychology space, and just how, what is attention all about? And there's a framework we use whenever we're creating something, and that is hook, story, offer, right? So hook them, you got to have something to grab their attention. Story keeps that attention. And then offer is just the way you think and the way you act. And so in terms of your profile, your story is really important. And we talked about that. That was point number 2. And then offer, I think just growing your network, thinking in the mindset of what can I offer them? Not what's in it for me, what can I do for them? If you kind of change the way you approach the conversation, I think that will benefit you quite a bit in the long run. So this has been absolutely amazing. Can't wait to see you guys on the next episode, and thanks for listening.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Adventures in CRE audio series. For show notes and additional resources, head over to www.adventuresincre.com/audio series. Would you like to learn real estate financial modeling in a matter of weeks and do it with zero guesswork? If so, the A.CRE Accelerator is for you. The Accelerator is a step-by-step, case-based program designed to teach you exactly what you need to know and in the order you need to know it, so you can gain both the knowledge and experience to take your career to the next level. To see if the Accelerator is right for you, go to www.adventuresincre.com/accelerator.